Ersity of Was. Happy Friday the 13th, everybody. Here I am out on campus in this nice little patch of bitterroot. When I originally discovered this plant, I fell in love with it because of its beautiful flowers and didn't realize its history and many uses. But once I discovered that and began learning more about the plant, I was very curious and, of course, wanted to try and taste it. But I hesitated to harvest it because there just weren't that very many of them. Well, I waited a couple weeks and I found quite a few. So I'm not going to take many, maybe just 2 or 3 to give them a taste, as I've never tasted this plant. And then I found a responsible way to harvest them where I can put part of the plant back into the earth so that it continues to grow. And that way I'm not taking all of this plant and not putting a way for it to continue to regenerate back into the earth. This is important because it allows the plant to propagate so you can enjoy it again later, and it pays respect to the earth and to the plant. Now, one reason I hesitated to harvest this plant to begin with was because I wasn't sure what it was. I knew it was a beautiful flower, but I didn't realize it was also an edible plant and a medicinal plant. Now, usually, the indigenous people harvest this plant early, long before it starts to bud or flower like this. They say once it gets to this point, it becomes really, really bitter. But in this case, I had to wait until I was sure of what plant I was dealing with before I harvested it. Generally, bitterroot grows in gravelly, rocky, shallow soil, and so you might have a little bit of a hard time getting up out of the earth at first. So what you want to do is just begin to loosen the soil around the plant. Get some of these bigger rocks out of the way. You can do a lot of this stuff with your hand without even really disturbing too much of the ground. Basically, you just want to get all this loose dirt out from around the plant so you can see what you're working with. You can use metal implements like digging knives or screwdrivers or digging sticks, but in this case I really prefer to be as gentle as possible, and that way you can get a nice clean root when you get it out. Do your best to get as much of the root as you can, and you'll see it's a nice little root there. The next step is to go in with your fingernails after you dust off some of this dirt and to remove the sort of tan coloration from the root. When you're finished, you end up with a nice clean white root. It's really easy just to scrape and flake the brown stuff off with your fingernail, and so there's really no extra tools required. You just kind of flake and pull it off. It's really light, just brown skin material that comes off, and you end up with a nice clean root. You can eat this raw, or in most cases it would be dried and then made into a soup or a candy later. And you'll notice that bitterroot often grows in these little pairs. When possible, these are the best ones to harvest because you can do so more sustainably. Because this is sort of a twin plant, you can very easily split the root, only taking half of the plant. That way you leave the other half in the ground to keep growing. Alternatively, in some cases, once you pull the root, you can split it, and inside you'll find a small, pink, heart-shaped seed that you can replant instead. And so, let's give one a try. Never tried bitterroot. This is just raw. It's bitter. Doesn't really have much of a taste to it at all. It's just kind of a bittery, kind of like a soft carrot. But not bad. Not enough to make you like, make a face or anything. It's just a little bitter. Bitterroot. Some good quick tips on foraging. If you don't know what it is, don't pick it. Some plants can be dangerous just to touch. Poison ivy, for instance. Other plants, you might get the juices of them on your hands and then rub your eyes later or something like that. You never can tell if you don't know. So if you don't know, don't pick it up. Of course, don't eat anything if you haven't properly identified it. This is especially important because you never can tell. Most of the plants kill you in very terrible ways from the inside out, and sometimes it takes a long time, sometimes it doesn't. So it's important to make sure that you always identify your plants properly. And it's tricky because plants range in appearance from region to region and species and family and different things like that. Another tip would be when you're foraging, even if you find a plant in abundance in a certain spot, don't harvest all from that spot. Try and go other places around the area and take a few little bits from each place. That way it doesn't overly impact the ecosystem itself or the animals that actually rely on that plant for food. Give back to the land whenever possible. When you take a plant, pour out a little water, leave a little gift of some cornmeal or some sugar, just to show that you appreciate the land. Take a moment, thank the plant before you take it. It is, after all, in most cases, giving its life just to give you a little bit of food or medicine.